so much that you do. I have to say, Paula, a line that you used just now, I wish I had a pen with me, because you talked about helping our programs go viral, and I really like that. We often talk about a multiplier effect. We often talk about how if we reach teachers, it's a ripple. And going viral just sounds a little cooler than that. So I'm going to use that. Thank you very much. We're very excited about what's happening with Docs Teach. And I need to reiterate something that David shared with you. And I'm going to say it again at the end of this. But we've started in September, when we initially launched the site, with 24 activities that my team had created. And there were about 3,000 documents on the site. Today there are about 4,500 documents on the site, thanks in large part to the foundation support and to the staff at the archives continuing to populate the site. And there are more than 2,400 activities that have been created. Now, I told this to a colleague who works in publications, and she said, that can't be right. And I said, no, it is. We started with 24, we're at 2,400, and she said, that's a 1,000-fold increase. And I said, yeah, it hasn't even been 6 months yet. I direct education and volunteer programs here at the National Archives, and I'm delighted to see so many of you, especially in that the weather could have kept you awake and didn't, so it's kind of nice to be a little cozy in this room together. Nice to see so many friends. I have 3 objectives this morning. My first one is to extend my thanks to the Foundation for the National Archives and to Texas Instruments for their continued support for so much that they do. I have to say, Paula, a line that you used just now, I wish I had a pen with me, because you talked about helping our programs go viral, and I really like that. We often talk about a multiplier effect. We often talk about how if we reach teachers, it's a ripple. And going viral just sounds a little cooler than that. So I'm going to use that. Thank you very much. We're very excited about what's happening with Docs Teach, and I need to reiterate something that David shared with you. And I'm going to say it again at the end of this. But we've started in September, when we initially launched the site, with 24 activities that my team had created. And there were about 3,000 documents on the site. Today there are about 4,500 documents on the site, thanks in large part to the foundation support and to the staff at the archives continuing to populate the site. And there are more than 2,400 activities that have been created. Now, I told this to a colleague who works in publications, and she said, that can't be right. And I said, no, it is. We started with 24, we're at 2,400, and she said, that's a 1,000-fold increase. And I said, yeah, it hasn't even been 6 months yet. So we're very excited about this project. So first thing I need to do is say thank you, because this is very exciting for those of us in education to watch things happen in a scale that 10 years ago would never have been possible. The second thing I get to do is do a quick highlight tour of the site for those of you who haven't seen it yet. This is the teaser to get you real excited about going back and playing around. And then the third thing I get to do is introduce you to 2 exceptional educators that are in the room. So I'm going to start with a little walking tour, and it'll take about 3 minutes. And then you get to hear from educators who are using the site. So I'm going to actually work off a little bit of script so I keep pace with this. So humor me and watch that on me, okay? All right, Frank, I'm ready when you are. Welcome to Docs Teach. On this site, users can find and collect digital images of documents from the holdings of the National Archives, combine them with 7 interactive tools to help bring history to life for their students. The site's URL is www.archives, it's one of those chaotic moments, docsteach.org. On the site, users can browse from more than 4,500 different documents by historical era. Historical eras have been identified in the National Standards for the Social Studies and the National Standards for History. They begin with the Revolutionary period and run all the way through contemporary times. In addition to browsing by historical era by clicking on each of these images, they can also browse by era using a drop-down screen that pops up when they click on the little browse icon. And they can also browse by the type of media. And so you'll see what's run through. Materials on the site do come in a variety of media: audiovisual materials, maps, photographs, textual materials, and more. And they can also search by items that have been recommended, and these are items that have been recommended by my team or by other educators who've used them in activities. They can also narrow their searches by keyword, and my favorite function of the site is the ability to identify their favorites. Out of 4,500 documents, I have about 100 favorites. So I'm really excited when I get to select those because they enable me to create activities very quickly. I've already identified my documents, so when I click on activities, I can either use materials that have already been done for me, or I can use one of 7 tools. One of the tools that is available is called Finding a Sequence, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It allows students to focus on chronological thinking skills by identifying documents and putting them in order. On focusing on details, we're trying to teach students to pay attention to details, not just in textual materials, but also through photographs and other materials. Making connections allows students to recognize cause and effect relationships, and recognizing that one event in the past certainly does affect future events, and potentially ones in our own future. Mapping history reminds us that historical events happened someplace, and reminds us how important learning geography is. Seeing the big picture is like imagining it. We can make connections between documents to, again, reveal relationships. In weighing the evidence, as you saw in the video, we're actually looking at the significance of different materials, and the tool allows us to visualize what those significant features are. And in interpreting data, we can focus on where information comes from. And it works particularly well with documents of interest in math and science classes. When you register on the site, you have the ability to create your own materials, as well as look through materials that have been developed for you. The numbers that I mentioned, in September we started with 24. On March 1st we were at 2017. Today's March 10th, we're at about 2,400. That's a pretty exciting number too, frankly. Almost 400 in less than a week. That's a little more than a week. We are thrilled by the response. When we initially described this site back in September, we were trying to tell the history education community about it. And we asked them, some of you who are here, to help us spread the word. And the word has certainly gotten out. And now I get to introduce you to 2 very special people in the room. The first is John Lee. John is an assistant professor at NC State in Raleigh. And this is going to sound really funny, but I met John online. I knew you'd laugh, so I figured I'd just go with it. Up until this morning, I had never met him in person. We met him through his blog. And right after we launched the site, we really started paying attention to it. So what are people saying? What are the tweets going on? What are the blogs saying? What are people that we don't know saying about our work? And we came across John's blog, and what he had done is he had asked his students to use the site and then evaluate it. And he teaches methods, so he's teaching the next generation of students. So we were reading what they thought of the site, and this is what one of them said. One of them posted this: "The Docs Teach website is a really neat tool. It can definitely be used in the classroom to teach students 21st century skills, especially critical thinking and technology. There is so much out there on the internet. This site gives students access to materials that they may not have known existed, and it is also teaching them research skills." Obviously, this young, soon-to-be teacher got it. Exactly what we were hoping would happen with the site. So naturally, we had to meet the professor. So I sent one of those random emails and said, "Are you the John Lee who's responsible for this site?" And he wrote back that he was. And so began a very nice relationship, and I was delighted to meet him this morning and give him the grand tour of the archives. So welcome, John.
In keeping with this move to digital history, comments on a digital device. And Leanne, thank you for having me. I found Docs Teach almost immediately on its launch. I did a very good job of getting the word out. Assigned it to my students. I teach a course on contemporary issues and social studies. And we're on the lookout for things that are exciting and forward thinking. So I assigned them the task of doing some pedagogical thinking and planning the lesson. And what I'd like to do is just say a few words about the about the resource from my perspective as an education professor, and then share with you a little bit of some more of the words of my students. One of the most consistent problems that we've had in history education is the absence of tools to support historical thinking among novice users. Textbooks have long included excerpts and even full documents, and the National Archives and other organizations have done a great job of packaging materials and providing them to us in print and digital formats. What we've lacked is an intentional environment to support students' historical thinking in meaningful and scaffolded ways. Docs Teach fills the void. Docs Teach places historical source material at the center of the learning environment, and in this sense replicates the work of historians. It's important for teachers as they work with their students to understand that the discipline of history involves skills and habits of mind that come from historians. Docs Teach also positions teachers at the center of the student learning experience. Teachers can't be everywhere at once, but Docs Teach can put teachers right there with students in a dynamic and supportive way. Docs Teach is not a replacement for some other tool or even an adaptation of an existing tool. Instead, I think it's a transformational workspace for teachers and learners, as an environment where teachers can design, support, and assess their students' learning, and as a resource where students can experience the work of history. Importantly, Docs Teach supports formative assessment, primarily through the student response system, but importantly for people like myself who are teacher educators, it can be used as a platform to introduce the idea of formative assessment to teacher education candidates. Formative assessment is critically important in education and often neglected. So I'm very pleased to see a tool that can help us in that area. The 7 tools in Docs Teach approximate thinking strategies used by historians. Each of these 7 tools signal to students important purposes that historians engage when inquiring, organizing their work, and presenting their findings. But for me, perhaps more importantly, the tools support teachers as they design their own pedagogies. This is complicated work. Teachers have to manage information about standards, curriculum, their students, the room, the trivial, and the significant. With all the complexity involved in planning to teach, teachers need help. And what Docs Teach does is provide support for the planning process of organizing disciplinary expertise and historical materials for use by novices. So what I'd like to do is to share with you some of the things that my teachers in my program have said about using Docs Teach. And y'all actually took one of mine, so that's fantastic. I can't wait to go back and tell them that you're quoting in the middle of that. One of my students, Chad, commented, "I really like the different activities and actually found it enjoyable and exciting to create my own. It would challenge students to go beyond the information presented in textbooks and give them an opportunity to make historical interpretations." Another student, Candace, she said, "Docs Teach, the activities on Docs Teach will encourage the construction of knowledge and aid students in forming their own conclusions about historical events." Another student, Lauren, she talked about access. There's so much information out there on the internet, it's overwhelming. And she appreciated that Docs Teach gives specific access to specific resources that have been valued and deemed to be important. Another student, Christopher, he talked about a particular activity and some subject matter content. And I think as you listen to the way he describes it, it gets at this notion of how teachers deal with complexities and work to try and get students in a position to be able to do the work, the expert work of historians. Christopher said, "I really enjoyed the assignment on interpreting data. I think that I may have taken the actual intention of the activity and spun it in a different direction. I chose to ask students to look at 3 different recreations concerning the military career of George Washington and interpret the meaning of the pieces and how they define Washington. I know that Washington deserves all the praise he receives. However, I also know it did not come easy for Washington. In fact, there were a couple instances when Washington almost lost his post as commander of the Revolutionary Forces. I want my students to get behind the mythology and hagiography of Washington in general and explore the primary sources to make their own inferences, and Docs Teach supports this work." I just want to, I want to share with you a couple more topical things that these students did, just because for me it's exciting to hear the depth and the authenticity in some of these topics. These are some of the things I've seen teachers planning to do. Evaluate a piece of propaganda from Pennsylvania in 1839 during the expansion of the railroad and the rise of regionalism. Compare 3 different pictures and determine what historical era is being depicted. And then have students answer questions about these 3 pictures, how they're related, what current events today might be depicted in those pictures. Another teacher had their students analyzing Civil War casualty figures by local community. Another one was exploring the handwritten final votes of the Constitutional Convention, examining women's employment during World War II, interpreting a document to infer about the significance of the Louisiana Purchase for Jefferson's legacy, and as a prompt in context for studying the emergence of manifest destiny. And then another teacher had students infer from a letter from Churchill FDR asking for aid from the U.S. to start as a starting point to discuss U.S. involvement in World War II. And he included 10 broad questions about World War II based on the content that emerged in the letter, and then had students use the new knowledge they had developed to write a letter to FDR about this perspective idea. So, for me, this work has led me to some conclusions, and I just want to kind of summarize where I think Docs Teach puts us. As evidenced by these teachers' thinking, Docs Teach performs a critically important task of simplifying the complexity of expert disciplinary thinking, while at the same time problematizing the experience so as to push learners, whether they're teachers or learners, to deepen and expand their existing knowledge, skills, and understanding. I'm looking forward to continuing to use Docs Teach. Now that I've met Leanne and everybody else in person, you're going to have to figure out how to keep me out of here.
I'm delighted to introduce a longtime friend. Alice Riley coordinates social studies for Fairfax County. I taught in a large district in Houston, Texas. It had about 30,000 students. This morning, Alice reminded me that Fairfax County has something on the order of 170,000 students. She wins. Fairfax County is enormous, and our opportunities to work with her teachers and her students, we know we are reaching a tremendous audience, and we greatly appreciate those opportunities. A couple of weeks ago, a colleague of mine went out to Fairfax County to do a workshop, and one of the teachers wrote to her. I think many teachers, this one came from a teacher who brought teachers here. It was a department head who brought teachers to our learning center. She says, I think many teachers thought this would be a dry, dusty, in-service day inside the confines of a musty old government building filled with documents. They were happily surprised by the modern facility in which we worked and the ingenious ways you showed them to use documents in teaching U.S. history. Teachers were especially pleased with the wonderful Docs Teach resources that NARA has made available. The teachers took with them many new ideas and knowledge of resources that will help and sustain them when they get back to their classrooms. That was a really good note. I am delighted to introduce Howard.
Thank you, Leanne. I feel very honored to be here to just express our thanks and how much the archives really fits in with our philosophy in Fairfax. As Leanne mentioned, we are the 11th largest school system in the country, representing more than 176,000 students. We have students that speak more than 100 languages. I feel very privileged that we also have a very vibrant social studies program because we teach social studies kindergarten through grade 12, as well as having 14 electives in our high schools. But our philosophy is to put the story back in history. We do that because we want students to develop historical thinking skills and to begin to think like an historian. As a result, teachers are encouraged to use multiple resources representing multiple perspectives of events taking place. One way to do that is through primary sources, and of course, student engagement is the key. Even our youngest students can look at photographs and analyze it historically like a historian. They can discuss the geography by describing the landscape that they see in the picture, or the climate based on what the kinds of clothes the people are wearing. The technology by describing what kinds of machines they see in the picture. The culture by describing what people are doing, what they're wearing, whether they're happy or sad by their expressions on their face, and why do they think that. Our students who have limited English skills are encouraged to develop these language skills by describing what they see in the visual primary sources. And of course, the National Archives has many, and best of all, for a school system in these times, they're free. By digitizing these primary sources, and through Docs Teach, the Archives makes these primary sources available to teachers in our classrooms, not only locally, but also around the world in a very organized and usable way. Students today are connected and using technology freely outside the school day. One report describes these students as free agent learners who use technology to increase their learning about topics that they are interested in, despite what may or may not occur in their classrooms. These students are using technology as a virtual library, a virtual tutor to connect with others when they have questions, a virtual study group to share information with fellow classmates, as well as a virtual locker to keep them organized. Their vision for a 21st century education includes learning that is socially based, untethered, and digitally rich. If we are to prepare our students for life after high school, the challenge for schools is to develop these digital literacy skills among all of our students in order to bridge the second digital divide that has been identified and exists because students are using technology in different ways. In Fairfax County, we are moving towards a digital learning environment with the vision to enable student-connected learning to take place anytime, anywhere. Docs Teach is helping us to get there in social studies. With this site, our students develop 21st century skills and skills that have been identified for career and college readiness, such as the 4 C's: critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication. The lessons in the Docs Teach site encourage students to think at higher levels and to draw conclusions from the primary sources used. The activities encourage critical thinking skills such as analysis, synthesis, evaluation. Many of the lesson plans and activities encourage collaboration and analysis of the related documents, as you saw in the video earlier. The lessons are organized in a manner in which teachers can easily access them and align them with their required curriculums. There are a number of sources out there purporting to do the same type of thing, but why not go straight to the original source, the National Archives, a trusted and reliable source? The structure of Docs Teach makes it easy to access the original documents, which for kids are a thrill to be able to see that these documents really do exist more than just words in a textbook. And supporting activities in a manner that meet the needs of our 21st century students, while at the same time making it easy for students to align their resources with their required curriculums. We've used it in Fairfax County. We love it. It fits our philosophy of student engagement, and we look forward to a continued relationship with National Archives. Thank you.